Everyone, my name is Carson Jeffres. I'm a researcher at the UC Davis Center for Watershed Sciences. I study fish, food webs, floodplains. I'm interested in how kind of what happens on the landscape affects the fish and how they ultimately go to the ocean and come back. So I work with a lot of different life cycles of the fish or parts of the fish. So why are you all here?
Releasing fish.
Releasing fish. Why? Do you know why you have the fish?
Because we're here to see if they have any thaimine deficiency.
Yeah, if they have any thaimine deficiency. So the thaimine deficiency story is kind of interesting, and it starts around February and March of 2020. What else was happening in February, March 2020? COVID. Yeah, in the same way, like kind of we had this like fundamental change in what was happening in our lives. We realized that there was something fundamentally wrong what was happening with the salmon that were coming back from the ocean. So those fish came back from the ocean in 2020. Actually in 2019, they spawned, we had their eggs, they hatched. They probably looked a lot like your salmon do right now. But we started seeing something that was wrong with those fish, is that they didn't look normal, they didn't look right. So we started looking at bacteria, we started looking at viruses, we started looking at fungi to see if there was something wrong with them. And then there was somebody who was working in the hatchery who was like, hey, I've seen this before in the Great Lakes. This looks like thaimine deficiency. So we took a handful of those fish and we put them in a bucket full of thaimine water, and they came back like that. All of a sudden those fish went from like looking spiraling where they weren't able to keep themselves up to they were all of a sudden, we call them Jesus fish. You put them in the vitamin water and boom, they were resurrected and they looked like regular fish again. And so all of a sudden we saw that this realization that there was a thaimine deficiency in these fish, but we didn't know what it was from and we didn't know what to do about it. And so we started this thaimine program at UC Davis along with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And so what we did is, it was kind of like playing pickup basketball, and you had a bunch of NBA players sitting on the side and you're picking up people. And that we started looking through who are the famous thaimine people, which you realize is a funny thing. Like, who are really the people who are really interested in thaimine deficiency? And so we started figuring it out. We started literally calling people from all over the world. And we said, hey, can you be on our team? Hey, can you be on our team? And to our surprise, most of them said yes. A couple of them had been retired for a couple of years, and yet they still like, yeah, this is a real big problem and I'm interested in this. I'll still show up. And so we started this thaimine deficiency team. And that team, which is still meeting every month at least, and still doing studies, is that we started to try and understand why the salmon were coming back with thaimine deficiency. And so who knows why they're deficient in thymine? The thyminase? Yeah, where's the thyminase at? In the ocean. Where is that at in the ocean? The anchovies. So thyminase is an enzyme that lives in the stomach of an anchovy. Anchovy is the same anchovy that we put on our, I guess you might put them in your Caesar salad dressing, you could put them on your pizzas, these little anchovies. And there's, if you only ate anchovies, you probably have the same problem, is that you probably be thaimine deficient. So don't eat just anchovies. If nothing else, that's what you should get out of this, is you have to eat a balanced diet. But does anybody know why we saw all of a sudden, anchovies have been in the ocean for a long time, right? Yeah. Off the coast, they've been part of the food. Why do you think that we might have seen it change? What's that? Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think most of that is correct. I will update a couple things. Climate change. So have we seen a lot of drought and a lot of rain lately in California?
Yeah.
We're swinging from like drought to floods, right?
Yep.
We are just in this like pendulum of going back and forth. How many years do we have that are normal? Almost, we don't have a normal here. We have generally wet or dry. And it's becoming more wet and more dry as we go forward due to climate change. And so in 2015, this story starts actually in 2015. How old were you all in 2015? Were you in Miss Hart's class in 4th grade? It might have been at that point in time.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, so
Elementary school.
Yeah, so when you all were in elementary school in 2015, is that the ocean off of California and really the North Pacific fundamentally changed. Is we had something called the blob, and that blob warmed the whole North Pacific. And when that whole North Pacific from California to Alaska, we were seeing tuna off of California and even like albacore tuna up in Alaska surveys, which is just unheard of. We've never seen anything like this before, is the food web started to change in the ocean. And this is where what we would like to say, this was the rise of the anchovy. All of a sudden, the anchovies became the dominant food resource in the ocean off of California. Is that we would go out and sample in like 2020, 2021, and you would be out there and you could look on the surface of the water and it would just be covered with anchovies. As far as you could see in the ocean, it was just anchovies for about 30 or 40 feet deep, for miles and miles and miles, just anchovies everywhere. And so when we first saw this, we're like, oh, this is gonna be great. The salmon are gonna come back, they're big, fat, happy. And we see these really, what we would think of as looking as like healthy salmon coming back. They're really big, they're really fatty. But what happened is that because of the thaiminase in their stomachs of the anchovies, that the salmon were just eating anchovies. It's kind of the equivalent of like, yeah, you know, you can eat a hamburger, eat a Big Mac every once in a while, but you can't eat a Big Mac for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a fries and a big Coke and have that be your only food resource. Because if you don't have a diverse diet, well, you're not eating healthy. And the same way the salmon were doing the same thing, is they were just eating a Big Mac fries and a big Coke every day for every meal. And then they're like, okay, all of a sudden they look really good and they taste really good for us, but they're not ultimately they're not healthy enough to have healthy babies. And so when they come back, their eggs don't have enough thymine in them, and then we start to see these defects. And so that's where you all come in, is that as the state started realizing this, is they started treating all of the eggs at fertilization for thymine deficiency. So more or less all the fish in the state are treated for thymine deficiency at fertilization because we realized this was such an important problem. But we don't know how many fish have the effects of thymine deficiency. Because if they're all being treated, you don't know what the mortality rate is for that. So we want to know what's happening for the fish that are in the wild, the ones that don't get treated, that are spawning in the gravels. What is the effect of thymine deficiency on those? What do you guys think? If they don't have enough thymine, what do you think happens to them?
Some of them die.
Yeah, some of them die. We don't know how many. Some of them, that is the perfect question or perfect answer. Some of them probably do die, but we don't know. And so we have 30 females out of the state hatcheries that are not treated for thymine deficiency. And you guys have 2 of their eggs, right? You have 2 batches.
Yeah.
So of the 30 females in the state that aren't treated, you all are collecting the data to see how they survive to this point. So we use that data, then we put it into a model to estimate what percentage of the fish in the wild have thymine deficiency and what their mortality rates are and how many of them might be surviving or dying. And so the data that you guys put in there is super important because it ultimately goes into the model that we use to estimate the survival rates for fish in the wild, which is pretty cool. I mean, you guys are like part of our research team that are collecting this data. And so what happens is, who's put data into the spreadsheet?
Ultimately, us and the teachers.
Yeah, I think everybody. I've seen all your names in there.
Yeah.
I looked through that. So
And really, really good questions coming from Maine Prairie, I have to say. So I look at the data set first before I decide which of the research team gets some of the questions. I'm kind of the first filter. And so I see all of the questions that come through and have been so impressed with the questions that come out of the classrooms at Maine Prairie, in both of the classrooms. So super impressive.
yeah, no, there's good stuff. So when you guys put that data in there, I get it. And then we take that, and you'll get the reveal data in there. We'll give that
Another week.
another week.
Because we have to make sure everybody releases before we tell you what your thymine levels were.
Yeah. So we take that data, we see what, all the stuff that you guys put in there. We'll process that and we'll put it with all the rest of the schools. And then we will tell you, what your fish's thymine values are and how many of them survive relative to the other schools of our 30 fish. So then that data that you all put in, then goes to NOAA, or the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration in Santa Cruz, where it goes into what we call our global model, which is we use those data to estimate survival by thaimine level for all the Chinook that are coming back to California. So it's pretty cool. Like what you guys are actually putting in actually goes all the way through the process from being in the classroom to being used to make management decisions for the salmon fishery in California. It's pretty rad.